Hello everyone, this is David from Automotive Press. I have a 2021 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Rubicon 4xe today, and this is kind of a unique model because it has a plug-in hybrid capability. And many of you guys know that I own a 2021 Tacoma TRD Pro, and the little secret that I didn't tell you before is that I actually placed a deposit on a Jeep Wrangler Rubicon before buying the Tacoma TRD Pro, and I was gonna buy this one instead of a Tacoma, but I changed my mind at the last minute thinking I need a larger pickup truck with the actual bed, so I ended up buying the Tacoma TRD Pro. But after driving this for a week, I'm beginning to have a bit of a buyer's remorse because there's so much that I love about the Jeep, and there is definitely a kind of a secret magic that goes with the feeling when you drive the Wrangler both on-road and off-road. Regardless of the powertrain that might be in this Jeep, the Wrangler competes with very few cars out there because not too many manufacturers are producing SUV or 4x4 in this kind of format. Now, of course, we have the new Ford Bronco, which is a direct competitor to the Jeep, and it'll be really interesting to see how those stack up with each other when we drive them both on-road and perhaps off-road as well. But for now, it kind of competes with Tacoma TRD Pro, the 4Runner TRD Pro, both of which I've owned and still owns the Tacoma TRD Pro. So I'm really curious to see how this thing performs against those vehicles and why so many people love the Jeep. And the question is, does the plug-in hybrid capability of this truck enhances or reduces the magic of the Jeep feel? So today I'm going to do a kind of an engineer's review and audit of this Jeep Wrangler Rubicon in the 4xe format, starting with the exterior. So what I'm going to do is to basically do a quick engineer's audit of the exterior body panel and the paint finish and the basic fit and finish, which is going to be interesting on this particular truck. And then I'm going to talk about 3 things I like about this Jeep, 3 things I'm not too crazy about. So that kind of wraps up my 7-point review because I'm going to cover all 7 things. So first, in terms of the audit, it's a bit hard, right, to evaluate this vehicle in terms of the manufacturing defect, the overall quality, and paint finish because the entire body structure is designed differently than your normal truck or normal SUV. Most of these panels can come off, they are removable, and of course we have an optional steel bumper here as well. So, I mean, what can you say? It's not so much how the panels fit together, it's more if the whole truck feels tight and rattle-free and squeak-free when I'm driving, and also whether or not the overall paint finish is good enough for this price range. So let me first talk about the paint finish. So if you look at the paint job, you don't expect a lot perhaps from a Jeep in some sense because it's all about ruggedness. But the paint job is quite good. I notice is in this particular Stingray paint, which is a beautiful paint, it's very consistent. The paint is smooth from all the panels, and no matter where I look, I have not seen a single defect. Whereas in the previous generation Jeep, I noticed the paint job can be a little bit questionable. But on this particular Jeep, the paint job all around is fantastic. I would say is as good as a car in $75,000 to $100,000 range in the luxury segment. In terms of the panel fit, that's a harder one to judge because again, all these parts, many of these parts will come off. They're removable. So you end up with a large gap throughout the panels because they're kind of meant to be removable anyway. So a bit difficult to judge, and I will say that the way the panels align together and the way they fit obviously are not as good as a normal SUV, especially if you compare it to a Japanese brands like Toyota. Again, because so many of these panels are removable, you end up with a larger gap than you would normally see in a normal vehicle. So I would say those are forgivable and not necessarily a fault of this design. And also I've noticed if you look at all the stickers and the decals, they are placed perfectly. There's no wrinkles or issues anywhere, and the emblems and badges also place beautifully. So I would say it's definitely way better than the way Jeep used to be, and even in comparison to some of the very expensive models you see out there, like the Mercedes G-Wagon, for example. You know what? This is first class. As far as I know, the outside is really good. So while the exterior meets my standard as an engineer, the interior and how the parts fit overall, I'm not so sure, because there are a lot of squeaks and rattles. Even though they're very minor, I don't know that you want to hear them in a car of this price range these days. Now this one has the optional one-touch Sky power top, which allow you to open it electronically, and so I love that option, but it does introduce a fair amount of noise on the highway, obviously, because it's not a solid roof. So that's also forgivable. Because the way engineer had to configure the plug-in hybrid system onto this Jeep, there are many things that are happening underneath the car here that allows the plug-in hybrid system to function properly with the engine. So there is some coupling and decoupling of elements that are happening, and they make noise as well. Now I do own a 2021 Toyota RAV4 Prime, which is also plug-in hybrid, obviously not in the same competition with this truck. But that thing is absolutely quiet with no squeaks, no rattles, and the hybrid and or the plug-in hybrid system works seamlessly. So perhaps it's not fair to compare to that model because Toyota has been doing that for a long time. But this Jeep does make a whole bunch of noises that you wonder what's going on down there. So perhaps in a year or 2 or 3 years, when Jeep decides to do a bit of a refresh and a facelifting of this Jeep, the hybrid or the plug-in hybrid system will have improved by that time, and it will be seamless and quiet and refined. So overall, I'm happy with the design, the engineering, and the fit and finish. Just the plug-in hybrid system needs to be refined further. Now let me talk about 3 things I like about this Jeep Wrangler 4xe and 3 things I'm not too crazy about. First and foremost, this is by far the most fun to drive Jeep Wrangler out there. Thanks to the motor being added to the 2-liter turbo engine, it has 375 horsepower and 470 foot-pounds of torque. So it has the second most amount of horsepower in Wrangler lineup, as much torque as the V8 powered Wrangler 392. So it's a pretty impressive package in terms of the power and torque, and it really comes through when you're driving this thing. There's no shortage of pick up and go, and when you step on the gas, it goes right away. And even though people might think having a motor might be complicated for off-roading, it actually enhances and helps with off-roading as well. So the performance of this Jeep is surprising in the sense that it has a good feedback from the steering. It has a predictable feeling when you drive on the road and also on the highway. And of course, it doesn't corner too well because it's very softly sprung for off-roading purposes. But this kind of Jeep magic is all there. It feels just right, it feels comfortable, and there's something absolutely joyful to drive about this Wrangler. The second positive thing about this Wrangler 4xe is obvious, which is because of the hybrid or the plug-in hybrid system, it gets pretty good fuel economy. In fact, 49 mpge, which is almost double the fuel economy of a normal Wrangler with a 2-liter turbo. With everyone concerned about fuel economy these days, it's just an added bonus that we get 49 miles per gallon equivalent on this thing, despite having a reasonably heavy truck. Now, if the battery is drained, you only get about 20 miles per gallon, which is worse than the Wrangler with the 2-liter turbo 4, because it's also a heavier truck. And finally, because it's a plug-in hybrid versus just a hybrid, if you run out of the juice or the battery capacity, well, it doesn't really matter because you can continue to drive like a normal hybrid. So there's a lot of advantage of the plug-in hybrid being literally plugged into the Jeep Wrangler. The third positive thing is the most important, which is the off-road ability of the Jeep Wrangler is not sacrificed but enhanced as a result of a plug-in hybrid. Does that make sense to you guys? Well, because when you're going off-roading and when you're trying to overcome some obstacles or trying to drive over some large rocks, for example, being able to modulate the accelerator is actually very important because what happens in a gasoline engine vehicle is that the engine has to kind of ramp up and RPM has to go up in order for you to get over an obstacle. So sometimes it's awkward. But with the plug-in hybrid system, the motor is kicked in. So when you try to step on the gas just lightly to get over something, well, it's immediate torque, right? And so it makes it easier for off-roading. Not everyone will agree with that, but from my experience as an engineer, any electric motor type of vehicle always performs a little bit better when you're trying to go over big rocks or big terrain that is hard to modulate with the gasoline engine models. Now let me talk about 3 things I'm not too crazy about on this Jeep Wrangler 4xe. Well, first and foremost, when you stop the engine and restart again, it always starts in hybrid mode, not in the pure electric mode. So you have to kind of play with the switches there if you want to drive in a pure electric mode. Now it does go from 0 to 60 in 6 seconds flat, which is amazing for a Jeep when all of the powertrain is working together. But the overall execution of how things work, both on-road and sometimes off-road, is a little bit questionable, as I mentioned earlier. And the reason why is that this Rubicon with a plug-in hybrid has a very complex system underneath. It's an engineering marvel, but there has to be a number of coupling and decoupling that takes place when you're driving this. And I can hear that noise, and also you can feel that coupling and decoupling. So the whole execution isn't quite as smooth as other plug-in hybrid I have driven. And I've driven a lot of different type of plug-in hybrids, and of course it's not fair to compare normal SUV like a Toyota RAV4 Prime to this one, because this has all of the off-road capability. But still, I think engineers could have done a little better job of making sure all the pieces fit together and work together to provide a seamless feel. The second negative thing is the experience of driving this in pure electric mode. Of course, it's a plug-in hybrid, so you want to drive in EV mode, but you only get 25 miles or 40 kilometers of range, which means you gotta plug in more often. And the power goes down to 134 horsepower with just the motor running. So it's kind of a slow experience. It doesn't accelerate very well, and you also have this limited range. So the whole point of owning the plug-in hybrid is somewhat compromised in this particular case, and so you end up driving this in a hybrid mode all the time, and that's my second negative point. So what's my third thing about this Jeep that I'm not too crazy about? Well, everything that you love about the Jeep experience is also something you might hate about the Jeep. What I mean by that is that what makes this Jeep tough, durable, and go anywhere capable vehicle is also what's responsible for making it bumpy, unrefined, and just kind of rough around the edges. So it's noisy on the highway, it's bumpy even on some of the smoother pavements, and generally speaking, it's not going to be anywhere as smooth and refined as a normal SUV like 4Runner or even the Tacoma TRD Pro trucks. So if you're hoping to get the most serene, smooth, refined feel, this isn't for you. But at the same time, this experience of kind of ruggedness, the durability of off-roader, and the ability to go almost anywhere is what you really love, that you might not mind the third negative point. Now that we're on the road, I can talk about the driving experience, which is unique to this Jeep Wrangler, especially when you compare to modern SUVs out there, like a 4Runner, for example. This one is obviously more engaged. You feel the road, it's rougher and not as smooth and refined, but that's what makes this Jeep unique and just really fun to drive. It's almost like driving a toy car when you were a kid, and this bumpy ride doesn't bother me because this is what makes this Jeep feel kind of special. The steering is actually quite good feel because it has a heft to it and a kind of a road feel that you don't get in other SUVs, and I can feel the bumpiness of the road, but it also means that I feel engaged and I'm communicating with what's happening underneath the truck. So everything that makes this truck noisy and also uncomfortable, it's also what makes it more engaging and all very different feel from other trucks that you drive. Overall, yes, it's not your everyday truck. Yes, it's not the smooth rider you want on a highway, but it brings smile to you and makes this experience very different and very unique. On the other hand, the acceleration is somewhat slow in the pure EV mode, so that's always a bit of a problem with this. But in the hybrid mode, it's smooth, it accelerates well. In fact, 0 to 60 is 6 seconds, which is really fast for a Jeep. And the braking works just fine. Everything else about this Jeep, while again a little bit unrefined, also brings that magic of a feeling of a Jeep. So at the end of the day, how do you describe a Jeep Wrangler? I own a 2021 Tacoma TRD Pro. I almost bought this one, and after driving this for a week, you know what? I'm having a buyer's remorse because the experience is so fun and so delightful and maybe even life-changing that I'm thinking maybe I should sell my Tacoma TRD Pro and buy the Jeep because I think it kind of enhances everything you do. You can go anywhere. I can go camping or fishing or whatever, and still wrapped up in this amazing, beautiful design that is unlike anything out there. Yes, the Ford Bronco might be as good or better than the Jeep Wrangler, but this is a proven model with all kinds of modding you can do, and that's what makes the Jeep life a very different life and a special one.